Today, getting over a breakup. When the relationship is over, how do you move on? Pamela Wells is here. She's author of the new novel, Heartbreakers. She has 29 rules for getting over a breakup. And later in the show, life coach and radio host Susanna Galland and family therapist Dr. James Walton will join us. First up, Pamela Wells. Great to have you here today, Pamela.
Thank you.
So this novel is about a group of young girls, teenage girls, who've all broken up with their boyfriends at the same time. And they sit down and come up with the breakup code.
Yes.
What is the breakup code?
The breakup code is a list of 29 rules that the character Alexia Bax in the book comes up with to help her three friends get over a breakup.
Okay, and what are some of the rules?
Some of the rules is do not call the ex's parents hoping that the mom can help you get through a breakup.
Okay.
Do not email or text or I am the ex ever again. Another rule is I'm having trouble remembering my own rules.
Don't call them, don't write them, don't email them, don't IM them, don't think about them, pretend they don't
forget
exist.
His birthday.
That's pretty much it.
Yes.
Now, and so they try to follow these rules somewhat successfully in some cases and not so successfully in others?
Yes. I wrote the book that way to be realistic because even though your mind may understand that you're over a breakup and you want to follow the code, but your heart may want you to do otherwise. Right. And so the book is a really cute way of showing teenage girls how they can move on from a breakup while following or not following the code, because the code is really a coping mechanism.
Right, and you talk about that at the end of the book. So how did you come up with these rules? Were these based on your own experience in dating?
Yes, it was. I was working on my master's in education psychology at Pepperdine a few years ago, and I was going through a breakup. And while in the psychology program, I understood that while I may want to call up my ex and plead for him to take me back, the psychology part of me that I was learning in the program taught me that I needed to figure out how to move on from the breakup in a healthy way. So I came up with the breakup code then while I was at Pepperdine.
Well, that's the thing. I think in a lot of ways in America today, we're very much, say what you feel, do what you feel, say what you feel, being truthful and honest and all that. But there's also a strategic side to this, or even the self-control issue, but meaning, it's just, you can call them, oh, I miss you, call 20 times a day, and which just makes the person run the other direction. But as we were saying, we were talking on the phone the other day, but if you don't call, then they call you and say, I miss you.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of strategy there, assuming you want to get back together, and of course I guess that's not always the case, but people don't stand back and think that way. It's kind of just whatever the emotion carries them along to do.
Yes.
Which is really working against their own purpose if they thought about it.
Yes, and that's kind of what happens with the characters in the book. Like Alexia, who's never had a boyfriend, so for her, getting over a breakup is super easy because she's never dealt with heartache, so she doesn't understand what a breakup feels like the same way the other three girls do. So that's sort of what the book is about, like your mind understanding not to call one of your boyfriend back, but wanting to do it. So. Because
there's basic human psychology at work, I guess is what we're saying.
Yes.
And that's what I thought, even though this book is about teenage girls, really it applies to everybody. I mean, maybe not all the rules, some of them were, maybe specifically for the girls, but it applies to everybody, men, women, I think adults, And I see, what I notice a lot around me is on-again, off-again relationships.
Yes.
They're together 1 minute, then they break up, then they're back together, break up, they're back together, they break up. And what do you think of that? How do the rules play into that? They're not really following the rules, are they?
I have a character in the book, Kelly, who likes one of the characters, Will. And they're in sort of an on and off again relationship. More, I guess, off because Kelly is really into Will, but Will is not as into Kelly as she would like him to be. And a lot of people, I do think, have the off and on again relationship because realistically, they're not dealing with what they're seeing really there. They're letting their emotions play into what's going on versus really seeing if the guy's into you or not into you or what's really going on with the relationship. So,
well, and that leads me to a couple of questions. I'm wondering, because I think sometimes, and one of your characters sort of says this in the book, I think, at one point, that I guess there's casual dating. People date for companionship because they're lonely or want to spend time with somebody.
Yes.
Maybe they should be hanging out with their friends. But so in other words, they kind of think in the back that, well, this isn't really Mrs. Right or Mr. Right or the one, but it's somebody to spend time with.
Yes.
What do you think is that? Is that a good idea or a bad idea to just?
I guess it depends on the person. So I tried to create 4 different girls that were like today's girls, and Raven is one of those characters that she likes guys, but she also just likes to hang out with guys because she likes the flirting. She likes the butterflies that they give her when she's talking with them. So it's not so much about a relationship for her, just the energy that she gets from hanging around a male.
Well, and what I've heard a lot of people say is they don't want to be lonely or be alone.
Yes.
So they'll date somebody or anybody because they're there. I mean, I hate to say it, but
yes,
and that's probably why there are relationship issues, because they're just dating somebody who's there.
I think a lot of people don't know how to date healthy. I don't really explore that as deep, being that the book is for teenage girls, so it's more about their first time experience with dating and breaking up. But I think the germ of that is coming from a lot of people who don't know how to date, quote unquote, healthy.
Well, that's the other thing, you know, too, when you say teenage girls, I think young people in general, there's a, you know, when it's the first love, there's a feeling, you know, you'll never meet anybody again or it's all over. But then when you get older in life and you've dated, you know, a lot of people, then all of a sudden you realize that life does go on and there are other people, and you know, there's a little bit of perspective helps sometimes. Yeah.
So the book is really innocent. I tended to bloom a little later in life, and I had my first serious boyfriend in grad school.
In grad school?
Yeah, so that's why the book, the characters read so innocent and so sweet, and I felt like I didn't think I could write it from an adult point of view and it be as true versus the first time, like you're saying, when you experience love for the first time and you don't really understand that you will get over this and you will move on. That's why I wrote it from a teenage point of view.
So how old were you when you were in grad school? When was your...
I'm 27.
Oh, you're 27, okay.
Yeah, so I don't want to tell how old I was blooming, but so I'm 27 now. So.
Is he one of the characters in the book?
No, it's fictitious. I don't want to give him that credit. It's all fictional, which is why I wrote about 4 girls.
Sure. And you said this is actually a series of books. You have a couple more planned, or am I giving away too much?
The second one is actually coming out next December, and it's going to come out, it's called The Crushes, from Scholastic, same people that published that book. And it's about turning a crush into a boyfriend. A lot of
so there's a strategy to that too.
Yes.
And it's because you have your list or your code, your strategy for doing these things.
Yes, I've actually 40 rules for that.
40 rules?
Yeah, so, and you can be crushing on someone, and by the end of the book, you'll know how to make him your boyfriend.
Well, we'll have you back for that one and see what you come up with that. But,
oh, thank you.
But how successful do you think people are in general following the rules? Because, you know, I mean, there are the rules, but I think people, well, I guess they just don't, again, think that it works, maybe, is one thing, or there's not the self-control. But
I think the self-control is not there. I think, like the characters in the book, the girls are actually very unsuccessful at following the rules. But I do think if you follow the rules, literally all 29 rules, you can't follow maybe rule 2 and then maybe follow rule 10. You have to follow all 29 rules to effectively get over the breakup. Yes, in the book, the girls do follow the rules here and they follow the rules there, and they're still able to move on from their breakups. But if you were taking the book from a point of view where you're going to just look at the code itself and follow it to get over a breakup, if you follow every single rule, arrogantly, I'm going to say you would really get over your breakup. But if you follow parts of it, then you can't hold me accountable, because then you probably wouldn't get over your breakup. So.
Well, the other thing you point out, though, is really, as one of the characters in the book, who's a psychologist, says, is that in a way, it's not so much whether or not you follow the rules. It really is more a coping mechanism or the distraction, you know, to take your mind off of, you know, what you, of the relationship, really, and that's one way of helping to move on.
Yes. So it's a coping mechanism. You focus on a hobby. I think the rules are just a really good way of you finding you, because sometimes you get lost when you're in a relationship with someone. And so one of the rules, too, is that two wholes make a relationship versus your half, and then the person is a half. So you have to be 2 whole, healthy people. So the rule is sort of a coping mechanism to help you get over it, and at the same time find yourself.
We'll be right back. And we are back today talking about breakups. Joining me now is Dr. James Walton, family therapist and talk show host and life coach, Susanna Galland. Pleasure to have you here today, Susanna.
Very, very nice to meet you
back,
too.
Jim.
I think it's nice to be here.
Hello.
So, how do you get over a breakup?
Well, the best way really to get over a breakup is to begin to date other people, actually.
Exactly.
It's like actually getting on with it.
Right.
That's interesting. That's from a guy's point of view. But if you're really devastated and you're in grief, depending on, I mean, if you're really heartbroken, you're not moving. You're absolutely paralyzed. You can't focus in the day. You can't get through a day. And so you're still waiting, you know, that believability that someone's actually dumped you.
That's interesting you say that, because
hasn't hit you. So how, I mean, have you really been in love? Because if we're talking about those moments. You don't get up and just go, great, I'm going to go date someone.
But you've read Pamela's list. You saw her 29 rules.
Yeah, and number 20 is a little bit, I mean, look, I know it's fictional, and nobody's saying that, because what if some teenagers read it, and it's...
Well, one of the rules is that you shouldn't date anybody else for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, which is great.
But I agree with Jim, though, I have to admit that I think the best way, though, is to move on, because if you don't, that's
If
really the
Well,
only
there
way
are,
to be
there
behind.
are a couple ways
If
of
you're not
handling it.
emotionally devastated, depending where you're at in your relationship. Obviously, these are kiss and tells with you now, aren't they?
Well, there's a
Okay,
chemical
it's all about
reaction that takes place with people when they're in love. And when you break up with them, it's as bad as getting off of heroin for some people.
Yeah.
The serotonin begins to drop in the brain, and people become very obsessive. And
So there's actually sort of like a physical addiction.
there is a physical
Huge.
response. Actually, SPECT scans
It's
show.
like withdrawal and the brain. And
Right, it's like a withdrawal. So what you have to do to get over the breakup, because you can wallow in that emotional experience, and people can do that, but you have to take some action and move forward. And it takes the conscious mind to go ahead and make a decision to do something. But you have a very strong physiological response to it. When people feel a breakup, they feel a tightness in their stomach, there's tightness in the throat, people have trouble sleeping at night. It's really physiological. It's not mental, it's actually physical that they experience it.
But you're not thinking, so you're overwhelmed. And the women, the multitude of women I know, and we're talking heavy breakups here. Or are you talking?
Well, breakups.
Well, there's difference. Breakups. There are different levels. I've got to tell you, when it's a real commitment and you really feel you're in love, and we can't measure that. Some
Well, I
people,
mean, we're talking about casual dating
yeah, you
versus
can't.
really...
Casual dating is very different. Yes, you can find a way with groups. You need support. That's the first thing. I mean, you know, especially you need support. You need a really good friend or someone to help you through this, whatever. Some
Absolutely.
kind of counsel or whatever it is you need. But so you can kind of look at yourself so you don't keep repeating it.
Well,
But
so I guess you're saying you should, that, you know, the emotions are strong and it's hard to fight that, but is there something to be gained by being, even if it's just, I hate to say it, but strategy? I mean,
you
for
know,
instance.
let me give you an example. When you are, you know, when you're breaking up, whatever, let's say somebody is ending it with you, or you are ending it with them. Even though there's that sense of relief, say when we end it with someone, there's also that guilt. Depending if we can't get rid of them, then we become hostile. So you've got to take into account what's going on. How are we ending it? Or how are they treating us? Did they talk to us? And we can be very angry. So it really depends on what scenario you're talking about, on how
Well,
you
okay,
deal with
let's
it.
say someone dumps
Yeah.
you and you're not happy about it. What do you do?
I get usually extraordinarily upset, angry, but I'm on the phone. The first thing I would do is reach out for
And by the way, it
I'll
doesn't have to be
someone.
you, but
No,
you.
if it were me and most of the people I know, I would reach out immediately and get help, talk to someone. I could not sit alone. And my first decision would not be, right, I'm going to go and date someone. That would not be my first thought. I would have to actually understand and get through before I did that.
But if people don't get out and start dating again, it can be 10, 20 years before they actually get over a relationship.
But I think it
So
takes
you have
groups.
to take, but you have to take a conscious step to get over it. You have to realize there's a way out of the pain that you're experiencing. A lot of people, when they go through a breakup, sort of lay down and feel like it's all over. This was the only one for them in their life. There's no one else that's going to come along for them, and they begin to pine for the person, and they become obsessive,
But
and they want to
that's-
start getting back into that
But
relationship.
This is casual dating or deep falling in love. There's two different things. You're falling in love, like a lot of people they've said in Canada, they've done tests. People have committed suicide from having, or people have died from broken hearts,
Oh,
physiologically.
absolutely, right. And
This
I'm
is
not
very
denying-
serious.
Right, right.
So, and maybe certain people that are watching will support this. That most of the women I know, and I'm not saying it might be different from men, but I've seen men very deeply in love. Takes them a while. They really are quite shattered, and I think it depends
I guess
on
what
the
I'm saying
circumstances.
is it possible to distance yourself? And is there, whether it's emotional, is there something to be gained from that? Whether it's even simply...
I think if you have a very good support group and you have a fair amount of work you've done on yourself, you have a healthy mindset already prepared so you know where to go. And no, most people don't always have that. And who's to say we're not facing new situations? You know,
Well, let me ask you. So
Yeah.
if you don't want to date and you don't go on, I mean, what...
well, you do date, but you take a little bit of healing time. You
Okay.
just take a break
Still
and
take
you
some time.
sit and you talk. You allow yourself to cry, to feel.
Right. But the best way to get over, and I'm not saying You break up one day and you go on a date the next. And some people can do that, but you do have to take some action.
I almost said a name, but I won't.
You do have you do have
That
to
woman?
you do have to make a decision to move on. You don't want to wallow in the experience. You certainly don't want to be calling the person back on the phone. You don't want to be reconnecting to them. What can be really helpful for people in breaking up and actually breaking off the feelings that they have or to get into their anger. Because when you have feelings of anger, anger happens to break the love connection that you have with another person. You don't want to forget the anger. You don't want to act out on it. You don't want to...
He said, don't take revenge.
Right, don't act on it. But what you can do is get in touch with that anger, and you can write it down on paper and keep it by your phone. Because if you keep it by your phone, the things that you don't like about that person or the things that made you angry, if you have that urge to go pick up the phone and make that call, that paper's sitting right there. You're going to look at it. You're going to, you know what? I'm just going to put that back down.
Well, because let's face it, if somebody is not interested, or if they're on the way out, or they think they're on the way out at least, calling them 20 times a day is only going to push them away. It's
well,
not gonna-
they won't answer, and it's obsessive, and it's stalking. It's really, but I think, you know, most people when they've been hurt, or the first thing they have to admit is, I don't think that person likes me, or I need that person to like me, and they're usually in denial about it for a little while. They'll say, oh, it's all right, you know, maybe he'll come around, maybe if I'm quiet for a week. So it takes a little while to tap into the anger when the realization hits.
Maybe you don't believe it. You think it's just, you had a bad argument.
Right. Because it's hard to get, you can't fake anger. You can't, you know that with your
Right, but
client,
people do feel anger when they break up.
Some do, and some are waiting because they don't want to totally admit it's over, and they still don't believe because it's the on and off again.
Right.
Right.
Don't
So
you think there are a
they
lot of on again, off again relationships? That's pretty
Completely
much the
on
default
again,
mode
off
these
again.
days. Well, here's my theory: that people hang out maybe casually, maybe they do like each other, maybe they don't. They're like it's basically friends in effect, but they're, you know, whatever else comes along with
You
it.
mean friends with is this the benefits
I didn't
without
invent that
benefits?
phrase, but yeah. But then they get sick of each other, and then they break up, and then they miss each other. Then they, you know,
Well,
they realize
but
they're
that's
not,
that
there's like basic human
casual-
emotion
But
there.
that's
that they,
usually when nothing else takes their place. Sometimes you go back.
But I guess
Well,
one thing,
there's a-
you know,
there's-
people drop everybody else, and they spend all their time 24/7 with each
But
other.
that's not
They get sick of each
healthy.
other.
That's
They
what
break
I'm-
up. Then they miss each other. Then they go back. Then they get sick of each other. Then they break up. Then they go back.
That's not
There's a
healthy.
reason for it. And the reason is the unconscious mind chooses our relationships. The conscious mind does the vetoing. So you have an unconscious draw to a person to help complete childhood, to heal an injury or a wound, or to mature and grow. And your unconscious mind works in that direction to connect you to another person. The conscious mind wants to have fun. The conscious mind likes fun. The unconscious wants to grow. And so you get into this conflict. If you want to have a good time, make friends. If you want to grow, have a relationship. And sometimes people enter into relationships expecting good times all the time, and it turns out it isn't because
When the
growth,
honeymoon's over.
well,
But
growth takes place
you-
through conflict.
Yeah, but you know, what if, let me propose this to you, what if, I'm not sure if you had a relationship that lasted long, but what if somebody you liked, who liked you, or whoever, could last longer? What if it could? And how would it look? I mean, there are times when we are in this.
So you're saying you're going to make them change their mind?
No, I think sometimes when we ask that question, we start to have an awareness socially and how we're interacting with relationships. It might occur to us that we might want a little bit more. And these circumstances happen.
Some people
Maybe
want a lot more.
when our jobs change, when we've had life changes, when we've lost other things we're not prepared for. Usually we start to look at ourselves. I mean, some people have it at 20, some people 40, some people 60. There's no measure. It's just, it's an interesting question. What if I did have a longer relationship with someone I like, and we could develop, and it had longevity? What would it look like? It's an interesting thought that opposes the on-off again.
I don't want to put you on the spot because we talked about something on the phone the other day. Maybe I should bring it up.
No,
But
go
you said
ahead.
that sometimes you think that people. Here we go.
I know what you're going to bring up. Go on.
The people you think they get a bit jaded as they get older.
They get extraordinarily jaded. And they do. And I'll tell you why. Because of all these books and all these rules and rules and rules and all these arguments and how you should not do this and not pick up a phone and write. And it's overwhelming. It saturates so many people that they just, and we have a web now, an internet. We have thousands and so much data that I don't think our brains know how to assimilate. So we often...
We have MySpace. Nobody needs to be lonely.
That's,
Well, what happens is we have expectations in a relationship.
Yeah.
And we feel if our expectations are not met,
They can get jaded.
then we need to move on to find somebody else. And people, we want instant gratification in our world. We want instant gratification in our relationships. And so if we're not getting that gratification, we decide, okay, well, this isn't for me, I'm going to move on. We don't make an unconscious bond with the person that we're dating. So when you were talking about casual dating as opposed to serious dating, a lot of people have a resistance to making that unconscious bond because in our unconscious mind, we know that there's pain that's going to come along with it. And we like the high of being in the relationship at the beginning. A lot of endorphins are rushing. We feel this high. We feel great. A year after you connect with somebody and that you have fallen in love, you go back to the same level of functioning you had before you met the person.
Takes time.
You go back down to that place and you become real again of who you were. You don't get that flood of emotion. So people can sometimes interpret that as, oh, I might not be in love with this person, or this person might not be the right one for me. And so they either do the breakup or they realize that this is something they want to work on, and they do the work to create the bond, to have growth in their life.
But I don't know anything that doesn't, unless you're working on yourself, recovery is very hard.
We'll be right back. And we are back today talking with Pamela Wells, author of Heartbreakers, and family therapist Dr. James Walton about getting over breakups. Welcome back, Pamela.
Thank you.
So, Jim, you had told me earlier that you have one way of getting over a breakup is sort of mentally cutting the cord. You want to tell us about that?
Yes.
How that works?
A lot of times what happens is people play a role play in their mind over and over again about the height of the love that they experienced with an individual. Mm-hmm. And so even when you come to the breakup, what happens is it keeps running over and over in your head. And we fool ourselves in the unconscious mind that somehow we're still connected and that we're being jilted. A way of being able to break that is to do in your mind this image, and something I lead people through is imagine yourself in the presence of this other person, and imagine in your mind you see cords attached to them, your heart and all over your body to the other person. And you do a mental cutting of the cords. You take out a knife or scissors and you cut them, and you experience the freedom that happens. You're teaching the mind that you're breaking away and you're separating. That's one way of doing it.
Any thoughts on that, Pamela?
Yes, I agree with him. That's pretty much what I think my breakup code is saying. That
It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
the way that
same kind
mentally
of
cut
thing.
the cords
Mentally cut the cord from the person. So I do agree.
Yeah, I read some pieces of your book and I really liked it. I thought it was very helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. When did you notice in your book that the friends were the friends very similar to each other, or were the friends very different? How?
In the book, the friends, I mean, obviously there's some similarities because they're friends, but the four girls are very different from one another. Raven is a girl who likes the company of a lot of guys. Alexia is a girl who's never had a broken heart. Kelly's the girl that does the off and on again dating. And Sydney is the one who's dated a guy for 2 years. So for her, the breakup is the hardest because she's used to him. She has dated him for 2 years, is literally like losing everything for her. And then also she has her mom and her do not have the best relationship. So a lot of times too, when people are dating, it depends on also the family dynamics that's going on too.
Do you think that people
Absolutely.
sometimes, I'm sorry, do you think that people sometimes enjoy the drama of the breakup? It seems to me these days that I see a lot of people who date for like 2 weeks and they break up for 6 months. The breakup was a lot bigger than the relationship ever was.
Well, some people confuse the idea of drama with closeness. And so people will feel like, well, especially if you grow up in a chaotic home and you interpret that closeness comes through chaos. And so when you go out to have a relationship, you reproduce that chaos because you misinterpret that as a feeling of closeness. And so again, like the breakup and get back together thing also has to do with some of the turmoil they experience. They feel some comfort with it. Even though on the outside they'll say they're not. On the inside they do.
Pamela?
I agree. I don't really explore that too much in the book. I tend to be a little bit more innocent because these girls are dealing with
I
love.
sound jaded, don't I? She said you get jaded as you're older.
These girls are dealing with love for the first time. So I'm not sure with Kelly if she's enjoying the drama of Will. I think every female can relate to liking a guy and him not being as into you, and you think that you need to convince him to be into you. You think that maybe he doesn't realize it and you need to kind of push it along. So that's what Callie is coming from with Will.
Thank you very much for being here today,
Oh,
Pamela.
thank you.
I appreciate it. The book is Heartbreakers. Dr. James Walton, family
Thank
therapist.
you.
Thanks,
That's
Jim. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.